That exact moment on a Tuesday evening.
Oh, yeah. Every parent knows it.
Right. I think every parent listening right now is having a visceral physical reaction just thinking about it.
Absolutely.
You walk through the door after a long day. You're still in the clothes you wore to that meeting that ran like 20 minutes too late.
We're exhausted.
Completely. And you step inside the hallway and instantly, there it is. The school bag is just abandoned on the floor like a tripped wire.
Yeah, right in the walkway.
Exactly. The shoes are definitively not on the small feet that belong to them. And somewhere upstairs, you can hear this undeniable gathering rumble of a sibling argument that's just about to erupt.
It's brewing.
It really is. You have been home for exactly 20 seconds, and as you stand at the foot of those stairs, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on your shoulders, you just have this quiet, sinking, entirely unworded knowledge that the next 2 hours are going to completely get away from you.
Just vanish.
Yeah, just like they got away from you last Tuesday, and, the Tuesday before that. You're looking down the barrel of an evening defined entirely by friction.
Well, that threshold moment is, it's really the universal baseline of modern family life.
It really feels like it.
It is. It's that profound feeling of crossing into your own home and realizing you are stepping onto a battlefield where you hold absolutely no strategic advantage.
Wow. Yeah, that's bleak, but accurate.
I mean, you aren't resting, right? You're just bracing for impact.
Yes.
You're waiting for the first explosion over homework or dinner or screen time, and your entire nervous system is essentially locked in a state of hypervigilance.
And what I find so wildly contradictory about this, and what I think a lot of our listeners struggle with, is that in literally every other domain of your life, you are a highly competent adult.
Right.
You manage complex projects, you handle difficult temperamental clients, you navigate the Byzantine politics of the modern office.
You know how to de-escalate a tense boardroom.
Exactly. But the second you are faced with a 6-year-old who refuses to eat a microscopic piece of broccoli or who won't put on their pajamas, all of that executive function just completely vanishes.
It evaporates.
It does. You revert to this primal, frustrated state. And so today, we are doing a deep dive into a source that serves as a manual built specifically for that exact Tuesday evening struggle.
Yeah.
We are looking at the Gentleman's Father Code, negotiating with the children you are raising, and we are actually incredibly lucky today because we are joined by the author himself.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So glad to have you. And what hooked me immediately about your background is that you aren't a child psychologist.
No, definitely not.
You're a professional, high-stakes negotiator. You spend your days in boardrooms where, time is short, people are terrified, and the cost of failure is measured in millions of dollars.
That's the day job, yeah.
But the genesis of your entire philosophy in this book was an evening where you came home and within like 15 minutes found yourself shouting at your child over long division.
Yeah, it's a remarkably humbling admission to make, honestly. I had this stunning realization that my world-class, heavily cultivated discipline completely evaporated the moment I walked into my own kitchen.
Which is wild to think about.
It exposes a blind spot that almost every parent has. I mean, we assume that because we hold the biological title of parent, authority should just naturally flow to us without the need for strategy.
Right, like it's just owed to us.
Exactly. But our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how applying the rigorous, unsentimental principles of high-stakes negotiation, specifically what I call the architecture of strategic preemption, can utterly transform the chaos of family life.
I love that phrase, architecture of strategic preemption.
Thank you. We are going to dismantle what I term the inherited masculine frame of parenting.
Oh, wait, let's get into that.
Because that frame relies on a very narrow, fragile set of blunt instruments, and we need to replace it with a highly flexible 30-move playbook.
So it's not just about surviving Tuesday night.
No, the ultimate objective here goes far beyond just reclaiming your Tuesday evenings. It's about building a durable, lifelong architecture for the relationship you have with your kids, so that when they are adults, they actually, want to come back and visit you.
That is the dream. I really want to dig into this inherited frame because as I was reading your material, I felt uncomfortably seen.
A lot of people say that.
The premise is that most fathers and parents in general really operate on a default operating system when it comes to discipline. It's an instruction-giving model built on a strict, unyielding binary.
Right.
You issue an instruction, put your shoes on, and in this inherited system, the child can only do one of two things. They either obey or they disobey.
That's the binary.
Right. And if they disobey, the playbook you inherited only gives you 3 moves. Move 1, you instruct them again. Move 2, you instruct them again, but this time you raise your voice.
You turn up the volume.
Yeah. And then move 3, you escalate to the nuclear option. You shout, you punish, you sigh heavily, you physically intimidate by crossing your arms and towering over them. And that is the entire behavioral loop.
It is. And think about the cognitive load of living in that binary system.
It's exhausting.
It's completely exhausting because you are permanently on vigil against the failure state. Every single interaction, from brushing teeth to getting in the car, has only 2 outcomes. And one of them means you've completely lost your authority.
Which feels terrible.
It does. But the massive paradigm shift here is realizing that children aren't actually just obeying or disobeying.
Okay, what are they doing then?
They are constantly, relentlessly negotiating.
Always.
Always. They are built to test perimeters. They have been running complex negotiations since they were 3 years old.
Wow. Okay. Can you give an example of that? Like, how does that look in real life?
Sure. To illustrate this, let's look at a classic scenario. You're standing in the doorway holding a pair of small shoes. Your 6-year-old daughter is on the floor reading a book about a horse.
Okay, I've been there.
In her world, at that exact second, that horse is the single most important entity in the universe. Her brain is fully immersed in that narrative.
Right.
You ask her to put the shoes on, she doesn't move. Now, in your mind, you are a reasonable adult giving a reasonable instruction, and you expect immediate obedience.
Right. And when she doesn't move, the inherited frame tells me she is defying me.
Exactly.
She is disrespecting my authority. My blood pressure spikes. I feel the need to crush the defiance immediately to maintain order.
But here's the reality.
Yeah.
She isn't defying you in the malicious way you perceive it. She's making an opening counteroffer.
Wait, the horse book is a counteroffer.
Yes. The horse book itself is the opening bid. When you ask again and she slowly turns her head or says, just a minute, that's her adjusting the terms of the negotiation.
Oh, wow.
By the time you finally get the shoes on her feet 9 minutes later, after raising your voice, issuing a threat, and thoroughly ruining the mood of the morning, a price has actually been settled.
A price? What do you mean?
Well, maybe she got 5 more minutes of the horse book. Or maybe she extracted a concession about what cup she gets at breakfast because you felt guilty for yelling.
Oh, I hate how true that is.
She didn't obey you. She negotiated with you.
Oh.
And the tragedy is she negotiated with a person who completely refused to recognize that a negotiation was even taking place.
Which means I use the worst possible tactics.
Exactly.
I have to pause here and I need to voice a deep skepticism that I know a lot of our listeners are feeling right now.
Go for it.
Because when you say negotiate with a 6-year-old, my instinctual, visceral reaction is absolutely not.
Sure.
Doesn't negotiating with a child mean you are essentially surrendering your role as the parent? It sounds like stepping down to their level and inviting endless, paralyzing bargaining over every little thing.
I hear that all the time.
I mean, if I think about a corporate environment, sure, the bad boss who only yells that inherited binary frame is terrible. But if a manager has to sit down and negotiate every single spreadsheet and email with their team, the company goes bankrupt.
Check it stops.
Right. Isn't treating a child like a negotiating partner just a recipe for creating an entitled kid who thinks everything is up for debate?
That resistance is completely natural, and it usually stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what negotiation actually is.
Okay, correct my misunderstanding.
We often conflate negotiation with weakness or with splitting the difference. But true negotiation is the opposite of weakness. Negotiation is not bribery.
Okay.
The parent who says, if you just put your shoes on, I'll give you a piece of candy in the car, is not negotiating. They are bribing,
Right.
which creates a dangerous dependency loop we can explore later. Furthermore, the parent who just sighs and lets the kids stay in their pajamas because they don't have the energy to fight is not negotiating. They are collapsing.
That distinction is huge.
Real, high-stakes negotiation requires establishing firm lines, understanding your leverage, and declining bad offers. A skilled negotiator walks away from unacceptable terms without losing their temper.
Because they know the parameters.
Exactly. They maintain emotional control because they know the parameters of the deal.
Okay, so if we take that back to the hallway with the shoes and the horsebook, I'm not bribing her and I'm not giving up and letting her go barefoot. What is the actual negotiator's move in that specific moment?
The move is to actively refuse the binary. Instead of seeing only 2 outcomes, she complies or she defies you, open up the playbook to those 30 flexible moves.
Okay.
You look for the underlying interest behind her position. What is the price she's actually asking for? She isn't staging a philosophical protest against footwear.
Right, she just likes the horse.
Exactly. She is asking for autonomy, or she needs to finish the cognitive loop of the story, or she just wants 2 more minutes with the horse. So the skilled negotiator drops the physical intimidation.
No towering over them.
Right. They sit on the edge of the bed, getting down to her eye level to remove the primal threat of a towering adult, acknowledges the horse and says, "That is a fine horse. I need your shoes on in 2 minutes. The horse can come with us to the front door while we do it if you like."
Oh, wow. That is a fundamental reframing of the conflict. You aren't fighting over the shoes anymore. You've introduced a variable she cares about the horse and tied it to the outcome you need.
Precisely. You gave an opening position that respects her current reality.
Mm-hmm.
She might push back and say, "Can I read one more page?"
Right, the counteroffer.
Here, you exercise controlled flexibility. You say, "Yes, you can read one more page, but it counts toward your 2 minutes."
And she agrees.
She agrees. The shoes go on at minute 3. Let's analyze the math of that exchange. It's the cheapest 3-minute delay of your week.
That's so true.
You didn't raise your voice. Your cortisol levels didn't spike. The morning peace is preserved. You maintained complete authority, but it was the quiet, unshakable authority of a coherent, strategic adult, not the fragile, desperate authority of someone who only knows how to shout.
You refuse the binary.
You refused the binary and found the partial settlement that allowed both parties to move forward.
And what strikes me is the compounding effect of this. If you do this once, it's a neat trick. But if you do this 30,000 times over a decade, which is honestly a conservative estimate of how many microfrictions you'll have with a child, you aren't just getting a kid to put their shoes on.
No, you're doing much more than that.
You are fundamentally rewiring how their brain handles conflict. You are raising a human being who knows how to articulate their preferences, how to read a room, and how to find middle ground without resorting to screaming.
Exactly.
The instruction-giving, shouting father raises a child who only learns 2 modes of operating in the world: blind submission to authority or aggressive defiance against it. And neither of those are skills you want an adult to have in the real world.
No. It's really an apprenticeship in conflict resolution.
No.
But accepting this premise leads us to a critical structural problem.
Which is?
If you accept that you are always in a negotiation with your child, you have to realize that the absolute worst time to negotiate is when the other party is already deeply entrenched in their position.
Oh, right. Like when they're already screaming.
Or just dug in. If you wait until 6:40 p.m. when the child has been deeply engrossed in a video game for an hour and a half, you have already lost the leverage.
Because the momentum belongs to them.
The momentum belongs to them. The physical environment belongs to them. In their nervous system, interrupting them at that exact moment to demand they come to dinner is an ambush. It is a hostile act.
Which perfectly transitions us into the concept of strategic preemption. Because reading this, I had a massive realization about my own evenings.
What was it?
Your book points out that the argument that explodes at the dinner table at 6:40 p.m. didn't actually start at 6:40 p.m.
No, it didn't.
It is simply the final, unpaid bill for 3 hours of unmanaged default decisions that drifted through the afternoon. You walk in the door at 6 p.m., you see the kid glued to the screen, and you think the argument is about turning the screen off.
But it's not.
But the argument actually started at 3 p.m. When the child got home, there was no structure in place, and they just defaulted to the path of least resistance. You are essentially walking into a trap that you set for yourself through your own absence of planning.
That's exactly it. The lack of an established framework creates a vacuum, and children will always fill a vacuum with whatever provides the highest immediate dopamine return.
Screens, usually.
Usually screens. The solution I provide is so elegantly simple, it almost feels like a cheat code for parenting. It's called the 3 o'clock contract.
Break that down for us.
The premise is that you must set the terms of the evening during what we call the calm hour, long before the friction of the evening rush begins.
Okay.
Sometime around 3:00 p.m., you establish the unalterable architecture of the evening. It is a brief 40-second conversation. Or, if you are at work, it's a text message to your spouse who communicates it to the kids, or a quick phone call.
And what does that sound like?
The language is incredibly concise. Dinner is at 6:30. We're having pasta. Screens go off at 6:00. Story at 7:30. Lights out at 8:00.
Just laying it all out.
That's the entirety of the contract. It's calm, it's specific, and crucially, it is delivered at a moment when the child's nervous system is baseline and they are not emotionally invested in any of those activities.
I look at this through the lens of business, and it's basically a service-level agreement It's like signing a lease on an apartment.
That's a great analogy.
When you rent a place, you sit down in a quiet office with the landlord. You negotiate the rent, the pet policy, the move-out date. You sign the paper. You do not stand in the doorway of your apartment every single Tuesday night at 6:00 p.m., haggling over how much rent you're going to pay for that specific evening.
You lose your mind.
The stress would be unbearable. Yet that is exactly the psychological environment we create for our kids every single night. We force them to guess what the rules are today, based on how tired we look when we walk through the door.
And that unpredictability breeds anxiety. And anxiety often manifests as defiance. But because you signed that metaphorical lease at 3:00 p.m., the linguistic toolkit you use when the friction inevitably arrives completely changes.
Yes, I wanted to ask about this specific phrase you use.
It is perhaps the most powerful tactical advice in the entire book. Let's say it's 6:00 p.m. You walk into the living room and tell them it's time to turn off the screen.
Okay.
They deploy their standard counteroffer. Just one more minute. I'm in the middle of a level.
Right.
Here is the critical pivot. You do not engage in a power struggle. You do not say, I said turn it off and I'm the boss. You say the contract was 6 o'clock.
The contract was, putting it in the past tense. I spent a long time thinking about why those three words are so disarming. It's incredibly subtle, but the psychological shift is massive.
It fundamentally alters the geometry of the conflict. By using the past tense and referencing the contract, you immediately remove yourself as the spontaneous, in-the-moment antagonist.
You aren't the bad guy anymore.
Right. You aren't a tired, grumpy parent arbitrarily exercising authority just to ruin their fun.
All right.
You are simply citing an external instrument, the agreement that already exists, that was established in the past, and that they implicitly accepted hours ago.
So they aren't arguing with you.
Exactly. You are no longer arguing with them. They're arguing with a concept from 3:00 p.m. The past tense locates the rule outside of your current emotional state. It transforms you from the arbitrary enforcer of the law into a neutral reporter of the law.
I can really see how that de-escalates things. It's like if a cop pulls you over, they don't say, I've decided you're driving too fast because I'm in a bad mood.
They point to the speed limit sign.
Right. The sign is the contract.
Yeah.
But I imagine the trap here is that for this external contract to have any weight, you absolutely cannot renegotiate it in the moment. You're very rigid about this in the book.
Absolutely rigid.
If they whine at 6:01 p.m. and you give them 2 more minutes just because it's easier than dealing with the whining, you have destroyed the architecture.
Because if you concede those 2 minutes, you haven't just lost 2 minutes of your evening. You have loudly and clearly communicated to your child that the 3 o'clock contract is a fiction.
Oh, that hurts to hear.
It's true, though. You've taught them that the initial boundary is nothing more than an opening bid, and that the true boundary is only discovered after they apply sufficient whining.
And once they learn that,
they will apply maximum friction every single night because you have trained them that friction yields rewards. The consistency of the boundary is what creates the authority.
and you provide a great mechanism to support that consistency, using countdowns instead of commands.
Yes, countdowns are vital.
You don't just walk in cold at 6:00 and rip the plug out of a wall. A sudden command is a neurological interruption. A countdown is a runway.
Exactly.
At 5:50, you walk in and say, 10 minutes. At 5.55, 5 minutes. At 5.59, 1 minute. You are giving their brain the necessary time to prepare for a state switch. They can finish their level, save their game, and close their mental loops. By the time you hit 0, the transition has actually already happened internally.
It respects their cognitive process. But building this architecture, the contracts, the countdowns, brings us to a deeper, more foundational issue.
What's that?
You could set the most brilliant terms in the world, but a contract is only as reliable as the currency used to back it. I argue quite forcefully that most parents are wandering around the emotional economy of childhood, paying their kids in entirely counterfeit money.
This concept of the childhood economy fascinated me. It forces you to audit how you actually incentivize behavior. You identify 3 specific transactional currencies that most fathers default to: money, threats, and food.
Yes.
And I'm completely guilty of all 3. I'll give you $5 if you clean the garage. If you don't finish that homework right now, I'm taking the iPad away for a week. If you eat your vegetables, you can have a massive bowl of ice cream.
The trap of those false currencies is that they are highly effective in the short term.
They really are.
The garage does get cleaned, the homework is completed, the broccoli is swallowed, so the parent gets a hit of dopamine thinking, my management style's working.
Right. I got compliance, so I must be doing it right. Why is it counterfeit if it gets the job done?
because it bankrupts the long-term relational architecture. Children are incredibly astute observers of systems. They register very quickly that you are treating them not as a human in development, but as a small economic agent to be incentivized.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at money. If you pay a child $5 to wash the car, they will wash it to an exact, mathematically precise $5 standard.
Oh, absolutely.
They will leave the wheel rims dirty, and they will miss the roof. They do not learn the intrinsic value of contributing to the household or the pride of a job well done. They learn that labor is just an annoying obstacle between them and $5.
That makes a lot of sense. What about threats?
Consider the threat. If you threaten to take away the iPad to force homework compliance, what is your leverage when they turn 16, get their own phone, and no longer care about your iPad?
You have none.
The entire threat architecture collapses overnight, and you're left staring at a teenager who never internalized the actual value of their education. The motivation was entirely external.
And the food bribe is perhaps the most insidious because you're attaching moral value and comfort to sugar, which sets up a lifetime of disordered eating habits. So, if those are the counterfeit currencies, what is the real economy?
The real economy is completely different.
If I can't use cash, threats, or cookies, how do I actually build capital with my kids?
The real gold standard currencies in a child's economy are time, attention, and autonomy. Let's be highly precise about time, because this is where a lot of well-meaning parents deceive themselves.
Okay.
Time does not mean coexisting in the same physical structure. It doesn't mean watching a movie together. Time, in this framework, is defined by the 20 minutes a day rule.
20 minutes.
It is 20 minutes of undivided one-on-one time with one specific child, with your phone physically located in another room entirely.
I read that and immediately felt a wave of defensive parental guilt. My brain immediately said, is 20 minutes really enough? That sounds so minimal.
It sounds small, yeah.
We have this cultural idea that good parenting requires endless sacrificial hours. Doesn't taking my kid to the zoo for a whole Saturday count for vastly more than just 20 minutes on a random Tuesday?
It is a mathematically fascinating and somewhat relieving distinction. I discuss what I call the rate of pure deposits. Let's dissect the Saturday at the zoo. You are there for 3 hours.
Right.
But during those 3 hours, you check a work email, you take a quick phone call, you scroll social media while they look at the monkeys. You are mentally drifting to the errands you have to run later.
I mean, yeah, of course.
A child's radar for divided attention is unparalleled. They pick up on the fact that while your body is present, your cognitive focus is elsewhere. The underlying message that fractured attention sends to a child is, you're not compelling enough to hold my focus over whatever is in this glowing rectangle.
Ouch. That is a brutal truth.
It is, but contrast that with 20 minutes of hyper-concentrated, device-free presence. You're doing whatever they want to do, building Legos, drawing, just talking, and you are completely locked in.
Pure focus.
Neurologically, a child's brain registers that concentrated, undivided focus as profound safety and deep validation. Because the quality of the attention is so high, 20 pure minutes is mathematically and developmentally infinitely more valuable than 3 diluted hours at the zoo.
That distinction naturally introduces the second currency, attention, which you separate from time in the book.
Yes, they are different.
Attention is described as the art of looking up. It's the micro moments. You're washing dishes, your kid walks in and starts talking. Attention is physically stopping the motion of the sponge, turning your body, making eye contact, and absorbing their presence.
It's the practice of noticing the small, seemingly insignificant details, rather than waiting for the giant milestones like a graduation or a championship game to offer validation.
Like saying, hey, you wore your hair differently today. It looks cool.
Exactly. Or you've been hovering around the kitchen looking a bit quiet tonight. Is your brain busy with something?
That practice of small noticing is the very substrate of emotional safety. It explicitly tells the child, my parent is a person who detects subtle changes in me.
And think about the long-term payoff of that.
Which is?
If they know you are tuned in enough to detect a new hairstyle or a quiet mood when they are 8, they will trust that you are safe to approach when they need to disclose massive, terrifying changes or problems when they are 16. You are proving your perceptual reliability.
And the third currency is autonomy, which I find to be the hardest one to actually deposit, because autonomy feels dangerously close to anarchy. It isn't letting a 4-year-old drive the car or play with power tools.
No, Autonomy must be age-appropriate, but the critical requirement is that the choices you offer must be real and consequential.
Consequential choices.
A lot of parents traffic in fake autonomy. They say, "Do you want broccoli or carrots for dinner?"
Right.
The child sees right through that. They know it's a rigged game. The parent is still entirely pulling the strings of the nutritional agenda. Real autonomy involves actual surrender of control by the parent.
What does that look like?
It's telling a 7-year-old, "You are in charge of choosing the family dinner this Friday. Whatever you pick, I will cook."
And if they choose plain beige pasta with absolutely no sauce or protein, which they will.
Then you all sit down and eat plain beige pasta. And they get to experience their sibling complaining about how dry it is.
Oh, they learn from the social feedback.
They get to learn, in a safe environment, the actual burden and social consequence of leadership and decision-making. Or consider clothing. Autonomy is letting a 5-year-old choose their own outfit for the grocery store, even if it results in a completely mismatched, aesthetically horrifying combination of a tutu, rain boots, and a winter coat in July.
See, that is where the parent's ego flares up. My brain immediately screams, everyone in aisle 4 is going to think I'm a negligent parent who doesn't know how to dress my child.
That is exactly the friction point. You have to realize that the currency is letting them be the supreme author of their own physical appearance. Enduring a slightly embarrassing outfit in public is the tiny, incredibly affordable price you pay to deposit a massive amount of autonomy into their emotional bank account.
That's a great way to look at it.
If you constantly override their choices to protect your own ego, you are stealing their reps. If you don't let them practice with small, suboptimal choices when they are 5 or 7, they will arrive at 18, completely paralyzed, entirely unable to choose a university, a partner, or career path because their parent has always shielded them from the curriculum of consequence.
Okay, so if we successfully deposit these real currencies, time, attention, autonomy, we build an incredible, resilient foundation of trust. But we still live in the physical world. We still have to survive the logistical nightmare of a Wednesday morning.
Right, the daily grind.
You can have all the relational trust in the world, but if the shoes aren't on their feet by 7:45 a.m., the school bus leaves without them and the entire day collapses. How does the negotiator's playbook address the high-friction choke points of daily routine? Your framework gets incredibly tactical here regarding mornings, meals, and screens. Let's start with the absolute worst one, the morning rush.
To fix the morning, you first need a diagnostic truth, and that truth is biological. When a young child wakes up, their frontal lobes, the precise region of the brain responsible for planning, sequencing, task initiation, and executive function, are essentially offline.
Offline.
They are cold. They are not booted up. So when a parent stands at the bottom of the stairs at 7 a.m. and asks a 7-year-old to perform a complex sequence of 9 different tasks, find your left sock, brush your teeth for 2 minutes, pack your homework folder, find your water bottle, you're asking them to run software on hardware that is currently incapable of processing it.
Which perfectly explains why I will send my kid upstairs to get dressed, and 10 minutes later I find them sitting on the floor, staring at a wall, holding a single sock, completely lost in thought.
Exactly.
My inherited frame tells me they are ignoring me, but the reality is their system is just buffering.
That's it. It is a biological limitation, not a behavioral defiance. Therefore, the strategic solution is to remove the burden of decision-making from the morning entirely. You implement a production line approach.
Okay, what are the moves?
Move 1 is building the launch pad the night before when executive function is higher. Bags are packed, water bottles are filled, and in the fridge, shoes are literally touching the front door.
Doing it when their brain works.
Right. Move 2 is visual sequencing. You establish a strict, unchanging order of operations. Wake, use the toilet, dress, eat, brush teeth, shoes on, out the door. For younger kids, you don't use verbal lists, you use pictograms. Literal drawings pinned to the wall showing the sequence.
And when they zone out?
When they inevitably get distracted, holding that single sock, you do not bark an order. You walk over, point to the pictogram, and ask a process question. Where are we on the chart?
And here's the rule that absolutely skewered me. Stop narrating. The constant running commentary parents provide. Get your shoes. Have you seen your coat? Why are you playing with the dog? Brush your teeth. Why is your bag upstairs? Come on, we're going to be late.
It's exhausting just hearing it.
I realized I act like a color commentator for my child's morning. It is exhausting for me to generate, and it must be maddening for them to hear. You use a brilliant analogy here. Think of a nagging car GPS.
Yes.
If your GPS barked at you every 3 seconds, turn left. Are you turning left? You should be turning left now. Why haven't you turned left? What would you do? You would mute it, or you would just tune it out as background static. By narrating the morning, parents turn their own voices into background static.
That analogy is spot on. When you over-narrate, you train the child that they do not need to take action on your first command or your second or your third. They learn they only need to move when the pitch of your voice reaches the danger frequency.
So how do we stop narrating time?
To stop narrating time, you have to externalize time. Children have a profound time blindness. Telling a 6-year-old at 7.4 we have to go means absolutely nothing to them. 7.4 is an abstract concept. You must use a visual kitchen timer one where a red disc disappears as time elapses. You say, when the red is gone, we walk out the door.
So the clock does the work.
Exactly. The mechanical clock becomes the enforcer of the boundary, conveying the pressure. This preserves the civility of your relationship because you are no longer the bad guy nagging them. You and the child are working together against the clock.
Let's shift from the morning battlefield to the evening one. Meals. The dinner table is the classic standoff. I'm picturing it now. It's 6:30 p.m. The 4-year-old is holding a tiny steamed Florève broccoli on the very edge of her fork.
We've all seen that look.
She is holding it 3 inches from her mouth, and she is just staring you down. She isn't crying. She isn't yelling. She's just waiting to see what you do.
That silent standoff is purely a battle for jurisdiction. The child has intuitively realized a fundamental physical truth. The inside of her mouth is the absolute last piece of real estate in your entire house that you cannot physically control.
Wow.
You can dress them, you can carry them, but you cannot force them to swallow. She is testing the absolute perimeter of your authority. If you respond to that test by begging, pleading, offering dessert bribes, or exploding in anger, you are fighting a battle on her terrain and you will lose every single time.
So how does the negotiator reclaim the terrain?
By establishing the 2 rules of the plate, which removes the negotiation entirely. Rule 1. The parent decides exactly what is served. The child decides exactly what is eaten.
So no custom meals.
There is no custom tasting menu. You are not a short order cook. If the family is having chicken and broccoli and she rejects the chicken, you do not pivot to making her a peanut butter sandwich or a bowl of yogurt.
And rule 2.
Rule 2. The kitchen closes immediately after dinner. If they choose not to eat what was served, the meal ends, the plates are cleared, and the kitchen is closed until breakfast the next morning.
I can hear the collective gasp of parental guilt. But my child will starve. They will wake up at 2 a.m. crying from hunger.
They will not starve. A child missing a single evening meal is not a medical emergency. It is a vital educational experience. Allowing them to feel a little evening hunger teaches them the direct biological consequence of their own choices.
Rather than shielding them from it.
Right. If you cave to the guilt and give them a bowl of sugary cereal at 8 p.m. because you feel bad, you have just taught them a master class in manipulation. You have taught them that holding out on the broccoli is a highly profitable strategy.
So holding the boundary is actually kindness.
The closed kitchen is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound consistency. It teaches them that when you establish a boundary, that boundary is a physical reality, not a suggestion.
Speaking of boundaries that feel impossible to hold, let's confront the digital elephant in the room. Screens. The book takes a very hard line on iPads, smartphones, and gaming consoles. You argue vehemently that we need to stop culturally treating these devices like toys.
They are definitely not toys.
They are not toys like a wooden train set or a doll. They are highly engineered environments built using the exact same psychological mechanics as slot machines and casinos. They are designed by thousands of behavioral engineers with one goal: to outcompete every other stimulus in your house for your child's dopamine.
This is why the friction around turning them off is so intense.
Yeah.
If you hand a child an iPad with a vague, open-ended, we'll see how long approach, and then you arbitrarily walk in 2 hours later and try to rip it out of their hands, you are asking a child with an immature prefrontal cortex to voluntarily walk out of a casino while they are on a massive winning streak.
That's a terrifying image.
It is neurologically agonizing for them to sever that dopamine loop. This highlights why the 3 o'clock contract and the countdowns we discussed earlier are not just polite suggestions, they are vital extraction protocol.
You're extracting them from the casino.
You establish the boundary before their brain enters the casino. You provide the 10, 5, and 1-minute countdowns to allow their brain to slowly detach from the high stimulation environment.
But even with the perfect countdown, the moment the screen actually goes black is brutal. You give a very specific physical tactic for this exact second. You cannot just take the screen away and leave the child standing in a sensory vacuum.
No, nature abhors a vacuum.
You have to provide a specific physical alternative the exact second the device goes away. You can't just wave your hand and say, go play with your toys. That's too abstract. It has to be tangible. A half-set chessboard waiting on the kitchen counter. A comic book open to the exact page they left off on with a glass of juice next to it. You have to build a highly defined physical landing pad for their brain to step onto as they exit the digital world.
That landing pad is crucial because if you fail to provide it, the sheer crushing boredom of the analog world will cause their dopamine-starved system to bounce right back, and they will be following you around begging for the iPad within 90 seconds. You have to deliberately guide the cognitive descent.
So we've engineered the daily logistics. We've smoothed out the mornings, held the line at meals, and managed the digital casinos. Perfecting this architecture prevents a massive amount of daily fires. But no matter how flawless your systems are, you are dealing with growing, volatile human beings.
Right. They are not robots.
Sometimes their physiological systems completely overload and crash, or sometimes, as they develop, they actively decide to calculate the odds and break your trust. That brings us to the hardest negotiations in the book. System crashes and moral arithmetic. Let's start with the ultimate system crash, the tantrum.
The dreaded tantrum.
Put us in the scene. You are in the supermarket aisle. Your 3-year-old saw the brightly colored, hyper-sugary cereal. You correctly held the boundary and said no. Now she is lying flat on the linoleum, face red, screaming at a pitch that shatters glass, and an older woman with a shopping cart is standing 10 feet away, actively glaring and judging your parenting.
It is an incredibly isolating, terrifying, and embarrassing moment for any parent. The intense instinct is to shut the noise down immediately by any means necessary, usually by threatening or caving.
Right, let's make it stop.
But you have to completely reframe what is occurring on that floor. A full-blown tantrum is not a behavioral choice. It is not a calculated negotiation tactic to get the cereal. It is a catastrophic physiological cascade.
A cascade.
The structures in her brain responsible for emotional regulation, the prefrontal cortex, have literally been bypassed by the amygdala. The system has crashed because she is tired, she's hungry, the lights are too bright, and the denial of the cereal was just the final drop that overflowed the glass. The wave of emotion she is experiencing is physically larger than her current neurological equipment can process.
So when parents start yelling at the kid to stop crying right now, it's the equivalent of screaming at a laptop that just gave you the blue screen of death.
It is exactly like that. You cannot command a crash server to reboot by shouting at it. In fact, your shouting is just adding more sensory threat to a system that is already completely overloaded.
So what's the negotiator's move?
This is why I introduced the 3 nevers of managing a tantrum. Never negotiate, never threaten, never explain.
Never explain. Why?
Because if you get down and try to logically explain why the cereal has too much sugar and is bad for her teeth, you are trying to feed complex linguistic data into a brain that is completely offline. It is utterly futile.
Okay, I understand why logic doesn't work. But what you actually do while the woman in aisle 4 is staring holes into your back? Do you just stand there like a statue?
You strip away all language and focus entirely on the physical and the spatial. Move 1. Lower your body mass. Do not stand over her with your hands on your hips. Towering signals a predatory threat to a panicked brain. Get down on her level.
Reduce the threat.
Angle your body slightly away so you aren't staring directly into her eyes, which is another high-intensity confrontational input. Move to, in absolute unbreakable silence.
That sounds incredibly hard to do in public.
It is hard, but you are essentially lending her the stability of your calm nervous system until hers slowly comes back online. You must actively ignore the audience in the grocery store. Their judgment is irrelevant to your child's neurology.
And when she recovers?
When she finally recovers, because biologically, all tantrums eventually exhaust themselves, you receive her without commentary. Do not say, "Are we quite done now?" Or C, "You embarrassed yourself for nothing." Just receive her, hold her if she wants to be held, and move on.
And the most critical instruction here, which goes against a lot of old-school discipline models, is that you must not punish them later for the tantrum.
Absolutely not. You cannot rationally punish a biological event. If you punish a tantrum by taking away a privilege later that evening when you are both calm, you are teaching the child a very dangerous lesson.
Which is what?
That losing control of their emotions is a punishable offense. If they learn that, they will begin to actively suppress their overwhelm. They will push it down. And that suppression leads directly to massive, invisible, internalized anxiety in their teenage years. You do not want to engineer a teenager who hides their distress from you.
That concept of a child learning to hide things from you brings us perfectly to the second type of system crash: lies.
Yes, lying is a major milestone.
You use a very visceral, mundane example that I think every parent has experienced. You go into the bathroom, your 8-year-old son just confidently looked you in the eye and told you he brushed his teeth. You walk in, pick up the toothbrush, and the bristles are bone dry. You have absolute material proof that he lied to your face. How do we navigate this betrayal without destroying the trust we've worked so hard to build?
The first step is to pause and distinguish between the two distinct species of lies. There is the power lie, where the child lies simply for the thrill of fooling an adult, experimenting with the boundary of their own private mind, and testing if they can manipulate reality.
Okay.
And then there's the far more common fear lie, where the child lies because they are afraid of the consequence of the truth. The dry toothbrush is almost always a fear lie. He was reading a comic book, he didn't want to stop and do the chore, you asked if he did it, and in a split second, he calculated that lying was cheaper than the confrontation.
He did the math. That was the conceptual breakthrough for me in this section. Children are inherently malicious liars. They're little game theorists.
Precisely.
They weigh the cost of telling the truth against the cost of telling the lie. And if they decide the truth is too expensive, they will lie. So as a parent, your primary job isn't just to be the morality police, slamming down the gavel. Your job is to fundamentally change the math of the equation.
You have to manipulate the moral arithmetic.
Yeah.
Consider the standard punitive approach. If a child breaks a vase and lies about it, and the punishment for lying is a week without television, but the punishment for confessing to breaking it is also a week without television, well, logically, the child should absolutely lie.
There's no incentive not to.
Right. There is zero incentive for them to confess if the penalty is identical. So the negotiator's framework dictates that you must heavily, predictably discount the consequence if they offer the truth voluntarily or confess when confronted.
Okay, what does that sound like?
If they confess to breaking the vase, you look at them and say, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I value that." You still apply a consequence.
Yeah.
Perhaps they lose 20 minutes of screen time and have to help sweep up the glass. But it must be massively, undeniably lighter than the penalty would have been for lying.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, channeling the inherited masculine frame. If I deeply discount the punishment just because they told the truth, aren't I essentially giving them a free pass to misbehave? Aren't I teaching them that they can run wild, break the rules, and get away with murder as long as they offer a quick confession afterward?
It can certainly feel that way to an ego that wants strict justice, but you have to zoom out and look at the ultimate long-term goal.
Which is?
The goal of parenting is not to raise a compliant robot who never makes a mistake or breaks a rule. The goal is to build an unshakable architecture of disclosure. Fast forward 10 years. Your daughter is no longer 8, lying about a toothbrush. She is 15. She's at a party. Something goes wrong.
Every parent's nightmare.
The designated driver is drunk. There are drugs present. Or she is in a situation where she feels profoundly unsafe. If you have spent the last decade proving to her that the truth is ruinously expensive and heavily punished, she will not call you. She will attempt to manage a highly dangerous situation on her own out of fear of your reaction.
That is terrifying.
But if you have spent 10 years proving the moral arithmetic that honesty is always honored and that the truth, no matter how ugly, is always the safest option with you, she will excuse herself, go to the bathroom, pick up the phone, and call you at 3 a.m. to come get her.
The phone call is a gift. That single line from your book gave me actual chills. You aren't just disciplining an 8-year-old over a dry toothbrush. You are carefully engineering that interactions specifically so that they will make that life-saving phone call when they are 15. Every reaction you have today is an investment in that future moment of crisis.
That is the essence of playing the long game. And that idea of preparing for the 15-year-old transitions us seamlessly into the final and undoubtedly the most emotionally complex phase of the architecture. I refer to adolescence as the long goodbye.
The long goodbye.
Yeah.
It's the moment your kid morphs into a polite or sometimes not so polite stranger in your house. You spend a decade building this incredibly tight, communicative, physical bond, and suddenly they are giving you one-word grunts.
Yep, grunts.
They're closing their bedroom door and staying in there for hours. The child you knew intimately is attenuating, fading out, and being replaced by this guarded, near adult. And your book points out that most parents, particularly fathers who are used to being problem solvers, completely panic here. They think they did something wrong or that they are losing their grip, so they double down.
They push harder.
They interrogate. How's your day? What did you do? Who did you sit with at lunch? What are you thinking about?
And we have to understand how the teenager experiences that interrogation. Every single one of those questions is felt as an extraction. The teenager is in the vital, necessary process of building a private, independent adult self. Their internal world is a construction site.
A construction site.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And the father's constant questioning is experienced as a demand for unearned access to that site. The harder you push to get in, the thicker and higher the walls they will build to keep you out. So the required strategic shift here is monumental. The father must undergo a complete identity transition, moving from being the architect of the child's life to being a consultant.
I love that distinction. The architect designs the building, sets the rules, and dictates the schedule. The consultant sits quietly in the office and waits to be asked for advice.
Exactly. To be a successful consultant, you have to voluntarily retire the small, standing rules of childhood. If you attempt to treat a 16-year-old with the same bedtime regulations, screen limits, and clothing rules as a 10-year-old, they will fight you tooth and nail. Not because they inherently hate rules, but because they deeply resent being treated like a child. You must hold the major non-negotiable safety boundaries: no drinking and driving, respect for the household with absolute iron consistency, but you drop the micromanagement. And you adopt a posture that I term disciplined invisibility.
Disciplined invisibility. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it makes so much sense. It means being physically available, but emotionally non-demanding.
Right.
It's driving them and their friends to football practice in total silence. You don't fill the air with your favorite podcasts. You don't use a captive audience to interrogate them about their grades. You just act as a calm, non-extractive, invisible presence. You are the chauffeur.
And the magic is that eventually, in that safe, quiet space where nothing is being demanded of them, they might just volunteer a tiny piece of their interior life.
But to maintain that level of trust, to be the consultant they actually want to hire, you have to be able to model what a competent adult looks like when they inevitably screw up. Which brings us to the mechanics of the apology. Because even if you memorize all 30 moves in this book, you are still human.
Oh, absolutely.
You are going to lose your temper. You are going to yell over spilled milk. You are going to break your own contracts.
We all do. And the inherited masculine frame tells fathers that you must never apologize to a child, because apologizing is an admission of weakness. It shatters the illusion of infallibility, and therefore it surrenders authority.
But the psychological reality is the exact opposite.
It is. The father who cannot apologize is incredibly brittle. His authority is based on a lie that the child can easily see through. The father who can apologize shows immense grounded strength. I outline a highly specific, surgical, 90-second four-part apology.
Take us through the 4 parts.
This is not a vague, manipulative, "I'm sorry you get upset when I yelled," which places the blame back on the child's reaction. A true apology requires 4 distinct steps. 1. Name what you did specifically. I raised my voice and called your question about the homework stupid.
Very direct.
2. Name the specific effect it had that made you feel humiliated and unsafe in this house. 3. Take absolute responsibility without caveats. That was entirely my fault. I had a hard day at work, but that is zero excuse for treating you that way.
No excuses.
None. And 4, commit to a small, measurable, keepable change. Next time I feel that frustrated, I will walk into the kitchen for 2 minutes before I answer you.
It's so precise. You don't make sweeping, impossible promises like, I'll never ever yell again, because you probably will, and a broken promise just becomes another lie. You promise a small mechanical change. And by executing this 4-part apology, you are doing something profound. You are giving your child the exact step-by-step blueprint for how they should handle their own failures and repair ruptures in their own adult relationships 30 years from now. You are teaching them how to be a safe partner to someone else.
And all of this labor, the 3.0 p.m. contracts, the deposits of pure attention, the extraction from the casinos, the navigated tantrums, the disciplined invisibility, the vulnerable apologies, it all culminates in the final defining physical act of parenthood.
The handover.
The handover. The day you move them into their university dorm or their first apartment.
The section in your book on this is incredibly poignant. It's the moment you realize the job is done. You describe how so many fathers inadvertently ruin this final day. They linger, they test the Wi-Fi router, they inspect the plumbing in the kitchen.
They find a million mundane excuses to delay the moment of departure, entirely because they cannot handle the crushing emotional weight of the separation.
Right. And by lingering, they selfishly force the child to manage the father's grief at the exact moment the child needs to be looking forward.
Yes, but the negotiator's final move is the doorway rule. You wait for her to signal that she is ready. Maybe she half unpacks a box, or she sits on the bed and checks her phone. She is mentally stepping into her future, a future which fundamentally does not feature you in the daily cast.
Right.
When you recognize that signal, you do not drag the moment out. You stand in the doorway, physically honoring that massive threshold, and you deliver 4 brief sentences. I'm proud of you. I love you. Phone if you need anything. Have a wonderful term. You hug them, you turn around, you walk away.
And the rule is absolute.
Right.
You do not turn back to look.
You do not turn back. You leave the visual image of a confident parent. And then the final instruction for the father. You must drive the entire way home in complete silence. No radio, no phone calls to distract yourself. You have to sit in the quiet car and let the profound reality of the shift wash over you. You have to mourn the end of an era and let the architecture you spent 18 painstaking years building become entirely redundant.
It's beautiful and it's absolutely heartbreaking. It perfectly encapsulates the bittersweet, paradoxical nature of this entire system. The ultimate promised reward for doing this perfectly, for deploying all 30 moves, for holding the lines when you were exhausted, for paying in the right currencies, is that your child eventually grows into someone who no longer needs you in the way they used to. By being a perfect architect, you successfully engineer your own obsolescence.
Which is the very definition of a successful handover. You aren't losing them, you are releasing them, fully equipped, so that they can choose to come back to you as a complete adult.
So let's take a breath and synthesize everything we've explored today. By treating parenting not as a dictatorship based on shouting, but with the rigorous, unsentimental discipline of a high-stakes negotiation, you are not being cold or transactional. In fact, you are doing the most loving thing possible. You are replacing the utter chaos of arbitrary rules, bribes, and endless friction with the deep, compounding currencies of time, attention, and consistency. You are building an environment where your word is an unshakable floor they can confidently stand on.
That's the core of it. And if we connect this to the overarching human experience, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear.
Think about the closest, most complex relationships in your adult life right now. Think about your partner, your boss, your closest friends. Think about how you instinctively handle conflict. Think about how you react when someone tells you no. How many of your default reactions, your ability or total inability to apologize, the way you enforce boundaries, or your desperate need for a specific type of validation. How many of those traits are actually just echoes of the unwritten contracts your parents signed with you in the kitchen when you were 6 years old?
Oh, wow.
You are the living, breathing product of those microscopic daily negotiations. And right now, every single evening when you walk through that door, whether you consciously realize it or not, you are building that exact same lifelong architecture for someone else. You are writing the code they will run for the rest of their lives. Choose your moves wisely.